Now, owning the data is really important. This is a slide from litigation. It's not litigation I was in, but a slide from litigation. It was about Zoloft and Pfizer. This is an internal document from Pfizer, and it's talking about Pfizer's view of data ownership. And it says all the studies belong to Pfizer, but look at the second bullet point. This is just stunning. And this is the kind of thing in the introduction. Let me clarify it a little bit. I was a family doc for 20 years, but when I got my teeth into the FDA's data about Vioxx and realized that the New England Journal article that told us doctors that Vioxx is a safer drug and we should use it over conventional anti-inflammatory drugs, when I saw the FDA data and realized that that was absolutely wrong and the FDA knew it was wrong and Merck was marketing as if it was safe and the New England Journal wasn't correcting it, I left practice in 2002 to write my first book, which is Overdosed America, about these issues. And I spent, Vioxx was pulled from the market a week after my book came out. It wasn't my doing directly because another study showed that Vioxx increased the risk of heart attack and stroke. But I had written the last book and I was all over the TV, the Today Show and so forth. And lawyers saw me and lawyers started to ask me to participate as an expert in national litigation. And I spent about 10 years in national litigation. And during that time, signing a confidentiality agreement, but I got to see the inside of the drug company's computers. Literally, the hard drives are dumped into databases, and you can put the whole thing together. And this, again, this is not litigation I was in, but this information that came from that process is critically important because you find out what they're really doing, not what they say they're doing, that we're dedicated to helping people live happier and fuller lives and so forth. This is what they're really doing. They say the purpose of data, Pfizer says this, the purpose of data is to support directly or indirectly marketing of our product. There's no sugarcoating here. They're doing research to support their marketing. Now, the first bullet is through the use of label enhancements and supplemental new drug application filings. That's fine. That means that a drug that's been approved by the FDA, they're doing studies on, and they want to get approval for another indication that the FDA hasn't yet approved, and that's completely legit, and we want drug companies to do that. But then the second bullet says they're going to support marketing of their product through publications for field force use. In plain English, this means that they're doing the research to be published in medical journals, peer-reviewed medical journals. Remember that the peer reviewers don't have access to the data, so they don't know if the data is actually true and complete or not. But through publications for field force use, that means for their drug reps to hand out to doctors as a sales tool. Now, this issue of drug companies buying reprints from the journals to hand out as marketing tools is a major issue in the commercial deception of doctors. Because what happens is this is a major source of journals' income, selling reprints. For example, The Lancet provided data in 2005. The other big journals didn't, but The Lancet did. And The Lancet showed that in 2005, 41% of its revenues came from selling reprints to the drug companies to hand out for the sales reps to hand out to the doctors. 41% of its income. Now, that creates the biggest conflict of interest of all, because the journals want to publish the articles that are going to have financial value for the drug companies to buy back and hand out to the doctors. And that creates a tremendously strong incentive for the journals to participate in this sham peer review where there isn't independent analysis of the manuscripts that are published, but the journals use their prestige to make it look like there's been independent peer review. And then they use, and then Pfizer admits, and this probably cost them a good deal of money because this is illegal, through publications that can be utilized to support off-label data dissemination. Now, it's not illegal to study off-label uses of drugs, and it's not illegal for drug reps to bring those articles that discuss off-label uses of drugs to doctors' offices. But it is illegal for drug reps to talk to doctors about that. And I can tell you that I've seen many cases in which the drug companies' marketing strategies include getting these articles published that support off-label use, and that they are consciously sending their drug reps out to market their products off-label and illegally from the FDA's point of view. And then finally, they say, therefore, commercial marketing and medical, the marketing department and the medical department need to be involved in all data dissemination efforts. And I'm going to show you in a minute why that is so important. But to go back to the study about the researching the terms of the contracts between the academic medical centers and the drug companies, here we see 24% of the contracts allow the sponsor to include its own statistical analyses in the manuscripts. Now, the peer reviewers haven't been able to see the actual data, and a quarter of the contracts say the sponsors can put their own data in and nobody can do anything about it. And this is the one that really is shocking to me. Half of the contracts allow the sponsor to write up the results for publication, and the investigators, the researchers, sponsors writing it up, the researchers can review the manuscript and suggest revisions, but there's no guarantee that those revisions will be accepted. So what this bottom line is saying is that 50% of the contracts between academic medical centers and drug companies allow the commercial sponsor of the research to ghostwrite the article, and the actual researchers can't change it. They can only suggest changes. Their only recourse is to resign from the project, give up the money and the prestige that they would glean if the article were published. So this is the situation we're in. We've got a good doctor, or maybe it's a nurse practitioner or a physician assistant, who's looking for evidence-based medicine, who wants to practice in accord with the principles that they've been trained to follow, evidence-based medicine. And they're so committed, they named their boat Scientific Evidence, and they've got a little doctor bag or nurse or physician assistant bag in the back. And then with a telescope, this healthcare professional is looking at the public information that's above the waterline. This is going to be an iceberg, this stuff below the waterline. But they can only see what's above the waterline. And what they see is peer-reviewed journal articles. But remember, the peer reviewers didn't get to look at the data. And they see clinical practice guidelines. But those clinical practice guidelines that set the standard of medical care and can be brought into malpractice cases if doctors and other professionals don't follow them. So they're looking at the clinical practice guidelines as evidence-based medicine, and they're not aware that the guidelines are based on the articles that have not been peer-reviewed, and that the experts who write the clinical guidelines don't have access to the data either. So the clinical practice guidelines are an echo of the commercial bias in the original published articles. And then there's drug company marketing, and you might say, well, good doctors aren't going to fall for that. But there's no way to avoid it. Maybe they don't let drug reps into their office, but it doesn't matter, because the experts that they rely on and the grand rounds that they go to and the conferences they go to and the CME dinners and the CME vacations that they go to, the drug companies all play a major role in those sources of information. So our good healthcare practitioner trying to do the right thing for his or her patients is basically promulgating the commercial vision of how to practice medicine. And what the doctors don't know, and when I lecture and I present these slides, I ask the audience, how many of you know that peer reviewers don't get to see the real data? About 2% of the doctors know that. What this doctor doesn't know is where this information came from. And where it came from is when a drug company is doing a clinical trial, they fill out case report forms. The trial, whoever's running the trial, fills out case report forms for each visit of each patient in a clinical trial. And that shows what their lab results are and what their clinical situation is. And generally, they ask non-specific questions about side effects, but they don't ask pressing questions or prospective questions about side effects. So, for example, we don't know what the side effect rate of statins are for people who are taking statins to lower their cholesterol. And the reason why we don't know what the side effect is that only 1 out of 44 studies actually asked prospectively, are you having muscle symptoms? Are you having specific side effects? Only 1 study asked that. So the information goes into the case report forms. The case report forms it's a huge volume of information that's transferred into electronic patient level data sets. And then the electronic data level sets are turned into clinical study reports that are about 3,000 pages long. The clinical study reports tabulate the data in the electronic data sets and analyze them supposedly, and usually, from my experience in litigation, usually according to the statistical analysis plan that was committed to before the trial started, and the statistical analysis plan and the protocol for the study. So that 3,000-page document, which is prepared for virtually all clinical trials that can have any regulatory impact with the FDA, relevance with the FDA, get this 3,000-page clinical study report, but that never gets to the public unless it's unsealed in litigation. So I was at a conference at a very prestigious university, and I was walking out of the room with an editor, not a chief editor, but an editor of one of the very prestigious journals. And I said to that editor, I said, why don't you require that drug companies, when they submit manuscripts to your journal for publication, why don't you require that they have to also submit the clinical study report in a searchable form? Because it's already been done, and it contains most of the truth about what's gone on in the study. It wouldn't cost the drug company anything to supply that. And I had learned from my work in litigation that within 10 or 20 hours of going through a 3,000-page report that's searchable, I could find what I needed to know about whether the drug company did what they said they were going to do and analyzed it the way they said they were going to, and included the data that was relevant. So I said, why don't you just simply require that when an article is submitted reporting the results of a clinical trial, they have to submit the clinical study report as well?